Hello and welcome. This is Paine Myles for Mirador TV, here for a short series about Thomas Paine in Lewis. He's one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, and he spent the last 6 years of his time before he left for what was then the North American colonies in my hometown of Lewis, East Sussex, in the south of England. I was asked it's some 11 years ago now, to be the director of a festival to celebrate his life. It was 200 years since his death, actually, but it seemed a good enough anniversary to have a look at and celebrate town. And I was asked to do this, as I've done several big exhibitions in town, and knew most of the councillors and the people in the town hall and what have you. So we had an event. It was 10 days. We had something like 2,000 events. It was great. And in the preparation for that, I did with Dr. Colin Brent, the most eminent historian in town, and Dr. Seth Gopin, an art historian from New York. He was running the abroad program for Rutgers University, had a keen interest in this. And we had a great research period, and since then I've written 2 books on this subject and found many, many things out. So this is the beginning, if you like, the first book that came out 11 years ago. I've just issued a 2nd edition. You can see it here over my shoulder. And it's the story about this man. So I'll start the journey, as it were. We had employed a picture researcher called Tim Wilcox, very skilled in this area. He used to curate Dulwich galleries, so right at the top of his game. And he found some images that hadn't really been out there before, never been used before. And this is one of them. This is a photograph of Thomas Paine here. And you can see very faintly there, it says Thomas Paine, London, 1790. It's a photograph of a painting. We don't know where the painting is. The photograph is a very good photograph. Lies in Thomas Paine's box in the Hines archive of the National Portrait Gallery. It lies just behind the main portrait gallery. You have to book an appointment to go in and look through the boxes. And this lies in there. We've got permission to use this image, and we would very much like to find out where this painting is, and then using modern techniques to find out who painted it. It's unsigned, which isn't unusual for the time. And but here we have the man. I really like this image of Thomas Paine. It's much better than the original Romney painting is lost. The engraving by Sharp is very good, but every image after that rather descends into a caricature type representation. So I like this one. We can see a real man here. And I have a little story. I was visited when the exhibition was running and this book was published. I was visited by who turned out to be a descendant of Thomas's father's brother, his uncle. And they came up the steps to a house, and the person looked just like this. It was just uncanny. So there was a living link resemblance as well, much more like this image here than any other image I've ever seen. So there we are. This is Thomas Paine in 1790, a little bit later than his time in Lewis. He was 37 when he left Lewis in 1774. He lived here from 1768 to 1774. And this is just the beginning of the story, a little journey to lay the ground for further explanation later. So this is Lewis from the, let's see if I can get onto the second slide here. Yeah, this is Lewis, painted in 1760. by an artist, a very competent artist called Dominique Serres. And this is Lewis, 8 years before Paine rode into town from the south of Lewis. And a lot of it you can see is the same. The castle's still there. St Michael's Church spire, it's a shingled spire, which is wooden tiles, slightly twisted in the sun. That's where Thomas Paine got married to Elizabeth Olive. She became Elizabeth Paine. They separated later, just as he was leaving Lewis. And that's another story we can tell. But a lot of these buildings are here. Pelham House, bathed in sunlight. Henry Shelley commissioned Serres to paint. There's Henry Shelley. Shelley was a kind of an agent to the Duke of Newcastle, Pelham. And he was more or less the Prime Minister at the time, a very powerful man, and this was his electoral patch. It was a contested election here. It wasn't a rotten borough. He had to spend a lot of money to get either himself or the people he wanted elected. So the various churches are still there. St Thomas's in the cliff there, the Yews is much the same. The lovely details here, men putting a barge down here, you can see the dress of the day. It really is a lovely painting. It's 2 meters wide, almost a meter high. So it's a very, very nice thing. Serres comes back in 1768, and this is a real treat because this is Lewis painted in 1768, again commissioned by Shelley. The Duke of Newcastle has died in this year, and his house is no longer bathed in light, and we understand that Henry Shelley had fallen out of favour. So one wonders whether there's a political landscape as well here. There's a windmill missing here that was there 6 years before, but it's much the same. It's a much smaller painting, actually about half the size of the previous one, so it's not a copy. He didn't overlay anything. He couldn't, the change in size. But again, very accurate. And I've had experts, Susan Morris writes the essay in this book, that's behind my head here. And she visited me recently to look at the proof of the copy, because there are essays in it, and we talked about these paintings, and I asked her some questions about this painting. And I said, you know, did he use much artistic license, Sarah? She said, no, he didn't. He was very accurate in what he drew. And Lewis is still looks much like this from the south. I've got myself in this position where Serres paints from, and I've taken photographs, and in the book I show comparisons of now and then, and it's not much different. It's a bit more built up around here in Southover. It's built up. There's the mound there, that's still there. There's Southover Church is still there. Southover, this has all been built in this area now, but all the skyline's the same, and the cliff, this is known as Cliff, and South Street down here still looks much the same. It's amazing. So we looked at Lewis, and this is another image that came forward. It's very nice to have images of these people that we want to talk about. And this is Thomas Cleo Rickman. He was 6 years old when Thomas Paine rode into town, but when Thomas Paine returned to London after the War of Independence, which he helped kindle, I'll talk about that later, but he came back and he wrote Rights of Man, and he lodged with this man, a Lewis man. Lewis was one of the Rickmans of Lewis, and Rickman, by then an adult in 1790, was a bookseller and writer and author himself. He was a poet, a muse, and a very, very close friend of Thomas Paine. They developed a friendship. Paine left him half of his, in his will, half of his wealth, which was considerable at the time when he died in 1809. So Cleo Rickman travelled to France. Paine ended up in jail, in the Luxembourg jail later, just in the bloody phase of the French Revolution. When he got out, Cleo Rickman went to France to see him, and in fact waved Paine off from those shores for Paine's return to America. He couldn't come back to England because he'd been tried for sedition in absentia, for writing Rights of Man Part 1 and Part 2, and had he come back he might have lost his life. So Rickman took his risks as well. So this is the pamphlet that Paine wrote while he was in jail. It's a very important, world-changing pamphlet, actually. It hasn't been properly recognised before, and I'll be talking about that in the next episode. So this is all for now. Paul Myles signing off from for Mirador TV, and I look forward to seeing you on the next session. Bye-bye.